Hello, and thank you for joining me for Daily Spark TV. You know what I want to do. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to be your best self. My guest today is Marilyn Alcorn, and we are talking about changing direction. Let me tell you a little bit more about Marilyn. Marilyn graduated from Raymond College, one of the original 4 cluster colleges located on the University of the Pacific Stockton campus in Stockton, California. She also earned her Clear California Multiple Subjects Teaching Credential. Marilyn teaches English Language Arts, Mathematics, Science, and Social Studies to grades K through 12 for the Stockton Unified School District for over 14 years. She is also the author of Adrian's Revenge and U-Turn to Paradise. Welcome to the show, Marilyn.
Thank you, Dr. Angela.
I'm so glad to have you here. Now, I want to ask you about being a teacher before we get into changing directions. What made you decide to become a teacher?
Dr. Angela, I must say that has a lot to do with why I wrote the book, U-Turn to Paradise. After so many years of being in construction, of all things, I overheard a conversation, and I think that was just God's providence act coming through to have me at that moment to hear that conversation where some parents were suggesting to a fellow coach. We were coaching YWCA, the young kids, their little like pee-wee soccer and basketball, that type of thing. And they were advising the coach, the gentleman, to become a teacher. They said, you're so good with kids. And I'm just there, maybe ear hustling. And it's like, And not long after that conversation, I don't even know if it was 48 hours, the Lord sent me another message. And I got to thinking again about what the parents were suggesting to that gentleman. And I said, I need to go look into that. And I went on over to the school district, Stockton Unified, and as if the Lord was doing this again. I was talking about, I kind of got lost track. Sometimes we lose track with what God tries to tell us. And I lost track because I had once been a laborer in construction work. And I got to thinking about the janitor's position. Why? I have no idea. Maybe that was the other one, the one that throws us off our game and throws us off our track. And I was talking to her, and she said, but you look like the type of person that doesn't mind starting from the ground up. Why don't we try substitute teaching? And I said, oh, that's right. That's what I was interested in originally when I first came in. This young lady got me everything I needed. Awesome. To get started, not only as a sub-teacher, which originally was her remark, but to get me started as being a regular teacher. Yeah. I ended up applying for everything I needed to apply for, passing everything I needed to pass, and became a full high school teacher teaching mathematics and science.
I love it. Talking about changing direction, right?
Yes.
Where you think that you're supposed to be on one path, and God has an awesome way of making sure to nudge us right back over into the lane that we're supposed to be on.
I was like a soccer mom at that time. I was just a retired from construction work mom and out there doing volunteer work.
Well, let me ask you, speaking of being in the right lane, about spiritual development, because that's something that you touch on in your books as well. Why is it important for us to understand as individuals that our spiritual development is just as important as anything else that we do in our day-to-day lives?
Dr. Angela, I'm so glad you asked that question because, again, when I was listening, to that conversation meant for someone else, that's where that spiritual discernment and wisdom comes in. And you get that from being involved with your spiritual self, allowing yourself to embrace and grow and mature. It's kind of like having an antenna that comes on, and as you grow and develop spiritually, your antenna, it becomes attuned to the spiritual workings and movements of God. that particular case, like you said, it changed my whole life around. And I must say it changed it monetarily for the better. For those that are your audience that are listening, if they're interested in of prosperity in a financial way, they need a more, for economic concerns, need a better paying job. And then spiritually, it helped me to see that not only was I important in life, myself, but others were. The children that came and that I became involved with, they came from families that oftentimes were not able to feed them on a regular basis. I found that most of my learners couldn't learn because their tummies were full. Were empty. They were so worried about where they're going to get their next meal. How could they do their ABCs?
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you say that, because I think that we forget that there are people that are truly disadvantaged, that are trying to carry on a day-to-day life, and it can be hard, and that also includes our little people as well. So if we can change direction a little bit, #mindset, right? Then we're able to include so many others in all that we do. Thank you for that reminder. Well, we need to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark TV. I am Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Marilyn Alcorn, and we're talking about changing direction. I know sometimes we get a little off path, we get a little off track, but we can always hit that reset button and get back on track. So Marilyn, one question that I have for you is that life presents so many different obstacles to us. Sometimes they're potholes. Sometimes they're just a little cracks in the pavement, if you will, but sometimes they're huge boulders that get placed there. What are some things that people can do to kind of help avoid those obstacles, to become more aware of those times when they're being pushed or even pulled off track?
Well, I'm not sure if there's so much avoiding the potholes, but it's as they go through the potholes, there is a way that you can go through them with less severity and less intensity of stress. I guess that's the best way to put it. One of the things is again, to open ourselves up to our spiritual self and our spiritual side. God is a God of providence, and it's been often said he works in mysterious ways. We don't know how he does what he does. He says in his word that my ways are not yours and your ways are not mine. But he's there to let us know in his word. He promises us, bring your burdens to me. Bring the things that concern you to me. You don't have to shoulder them alone.
Absolutely.
So as we hit those potholes, in a figurative way, we can bring those cares and burdens to him, and he will help shoulder them. He's there to allow his angels to provide us comfort during those dark and down times. We don't have to succumb to depression and deep anxieties. The Lord is there to allow his angels to lift us up. It can be a momentary thing. We could have fallen, but by allowing ourselves that little movement of change in God's direction, I call it in the up direction, then yes, the Lord is there. His providence is there to carry us through.
Now, one thing that you talk about when you are traveling, doing book signings, or doing your webinars and such is holistic health, and remembering to have an holistic approach to all that we do. What have you found to be 3 tips that people really tend to kind of take to, that when you say that, they're like, thanks for that reminder?
Yes. And part of that is, again, the mentioning of God and a belief outside of ourselves, of an entity, outside of ourselves that is greater. People tend to forget the hustle and bustle of life kind of catches up and overwhelms us to the point where we forget that there is a non-physical entity. You know, we're so moved by our jobs, our paychecks, paycheck to paycheck. You hear that often said. Fast pace of life, movement, quick movement. There's not enough time spent on slowing down.
Yeah.
Allowing that time to meditate on the goodness of God. One of our greatest Psalms, a lot of people are it's very popular among people, is the 23rd Psalm. And in that last Psalm, 23rd and 6th, it tells us about surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord. That thing called goodness, settling down a little bit to remember that, oh, goodness, peace, calm.
Yeah.
What can I bring to the table? Bring some peace, bring some calmness, slow it down a little bit.
I love that, to remember to bring it down, to have that sense of calm. And I think that we do allow our day-to-day, like you said, that hustle and bustle to become the deal breaker for the day. And before you know it, you're a victim of road rage, or you're fussing at your kids, or you're just not being yourself because the world has gotten to you and you've forgotten to be your spiritual best self. I love that you have reminded us of that. Now, you are also an author, and I want to ask, you were a teacher. You mentioned that you did a little bit of construction, and now you are an author as well. What made you decide that you wanted to add that title to your list of occupations?
Well, Dr. Angela, one of the things I didn't tell you just a little bit ago, and I often advise people in terms of what they can do to help themselves holistically, is again in the slowing down process on your own. When I said meditating, you can also read little snippets about what others have done to help others. Mother Teresa, for example, who ended up becoming Saint Teresa. I've read a lot about her, and I use these moments to help me to realize that I have to look and see what I can do to help others.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what a great thing to be able to share that in book form so that anyone can access it at any time.
Yes.
I love it. Well, we need to take a very short break, but when we get back, we're going to continue this conversation about changing direction. We'll be back right after this.
Hi, I am Marilyn Alcorn, and I have written a book. It's called U-Turn to Paradise. U-Turn to Paradise is somewhat of a how-to book, and what it does is it kind of tells you how to get yourself ready to meet. Oftentimes people say meet your maker, but to meet your maker in a very real and positive way. To be ready when God comes, Jesus comes back to pick you up. We often say, oh, I'm going to be caught up. I'm going to be taken up to heaven. Well, are you really? This book will help you get there and understand that there is something you must do. You must make a U-turn to paradise. The book is available on Amazon, barnesandnobles.com, where other booksellers, Christian books, are sold, and of course on my website, MarilynAlcorn.com.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark TV. I'm Dr. Angela Tester. My guest today is Marilyn Alcorn, and we're talking about changing direction. Now, at any given moment, we are allowed to hit that reset button. So I want to ask you, Marilyn, so many times we find that there are things that we do that bring us a sense of joy, a sense of peace, and kind of help us calm down to kind of settle in at the end of the day. Do you find that writing is one of those ways that you're able to come back to a sense of balance, come back to center?
Yes, yes, Angela. I tell you, it's amazing. Um, a lot of people just don't know if they take the time to just write down their thoughts, write down their experiences. One of my books, I actually allow a page or two near the end of the book and it's like a graph, a chart, to chart your daily experiences. Somewhat of a journal, but more specifically, a way to the things that kind of come back at you and stress you over, kind of overstress you for that moment. It allows you a time to rethink it. Almost, instead of just hitting that reset button, but rethink it first.
Yeah.
Reflect, and then set out to either chart a particular goal for how to handle it next time, so that you're not sent to that point of stress,
Yeah.
or
Absolutely.
to get through it and be thankful. Say, Lord, you got me through this. And I'm going to take this moment to write this down and thank you for that.
As a therapist, one of the things that I suggest is that people do journal. And so many times we think that journaling is something that we only wrote in our diaries when we were 10, 12-year-old little girls. But getting those thoughts out of your head and onto paper really can clear your mind. It can allow you to then make more room for that calm, for that peace, for that joy. And I'm so glad that you've reminded everyone that they need to do that.
Yes.
Now, another thing when we talk about spiritual development as well as holistic health is depending on who you are, you may say affirmation. Some people say mantras. Others say declaration. Whatever word you use there. Have you found that when you're sharing with others and encouraging others, that that's something that really does work, that it allows people to move from stuck to unstuck?
Yes, Dr. Angela. In fact, that is one of the things that moved me when it was at a critical point where I needed to make that change. I call it make that U-turn in my life to paradise. And what it does, it just is a way to kind of drown out some of the world's push, gotta go, where you're not taking that time to really think of, okay, what is actually bothering me?
Right.
What is allowing this to be an obstacle for me to move on and move beyond the point of depressed atmosphere and depressed view of how I'm seeing things. It may not be quite depression, but I'm depressed in the sense of how I'm seeing the problem. And what I did was I actually settled on, again, the Word of God. One of the Psalms, I believe it was Psalms 25, I shouldn't ever forget it because it became like a mantra. I just repeated it over and over again. I read it over my children at night as they fell off to sleep. Last thing I did before I went to bed was to read it over them. Then I came back in my own room. I read it over myself and repeated it. And it got us through. And it also helped to, again, set up that fine antenna for God's movement in our lives, His providence to be revealed and to work with us. So I always suggest that pick a scripture, pick a prayer, pick whatever it takes, a song. There's so many gospels songs out there for one to choose and to remind oneself of that there is this thing called goodness.
Absolutely.
For goodness sake, and that we are capable of receiving that goodness and enjoying that goodness. There's a saying out, don't let the devil take your joy away from you.
Absolutely.
And that's part of that. That's what you're doing. And the more you say that, the more you be a part of that, sing it out, dance it out, write it out. Hey, the more it happens, the positive happens. The lemonade gets done. Oh, that's sweet enough. The Lord says in His Word, oh, taste and see that I am good.
Yes,
And it
yes.
does happen.
Thank you so much for that reminder, because I find that so many times we have a tendency to remember the negative things that
Yes.
people have said, but we easily dismiss or even have a hard time accepting the good things that people have said.
Yes.
Now, I know that we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you one more question, and that question is this. What is one thing that someone can do to help keep themselves motivated every day?
I was part of a group, Dr. Angela, that looked at the question of depression and anxiety. It looked at it in a positive way as to what we can do, kind of self-care thing, type of thing. And one of the things they did with us is advise us to read the Psalms daily and the book of Proverbs. In the book of Proverbs, there's 31 chapters. So generally, since our months have 31 days, you know basically can read each day a proverb, a chapter.
Is awesome.
And then, of course, the Psalms, you just read along as you feel comfortable to do, either at the same time or later throughout the day. Maybe choose one for the morning and one for the evening, a chapter of each. And it really makes a difference. Again,
It really
that
does, yes.
nurturing, that spiritual side of us, turning our life, that helps to turn our lives around so that we're just not overwhelmed and drowning. You know, we're drowning in our sorrows. No, there's no need. The Lord gave us His book. His book is chock full of beautiful, beautiful words and scriptures that will help lift us up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. Remember that His words will help lift us up when we are changing direction. Thank you so much, Marilyn Alcorn, for being on Daily Spark TV today.
Welcome, Doc.
And thank you so much for tuning in as well. I hope that I have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you to change direction and be on the path that God has placed you on. Until next time, everyone. Bye-bye.